If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing to the channel. When you do, make sure you hit the notification bell. That means that you will be informed of when a new video has been released. If you would like to take that support one step further, you can do that via Patreon, which is an optional monthly service. You can donate money towards the channel, or you can go over to Ko-fi.com, and for the price of a coffee you can help donate towards the channel as well. Links for all of those will be in the description of the video, and without further ado, enjoy the video. We all ready?
All good.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be listening and now watching another episode of a Non League Nosh. I am James, and as always, I'm joined by my colleague and good friend Adam. How are you doing this evening? You well, mate?
Yeah, very good. My first time on the actual video podcast, other than our little one the other day.
Yes, yeah, which was quite nice just to get a few thoughts and feelings about how things have been going recently off the chest and talk about some highlights and whatnot. It was good just to be able to relax. And
it's nice not to really have an agenda, but just talk about football, isn't it, for a night?
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. With every guest that we have on, there is always a structure to those things. But, you know, last week's one, the final one we did, there was no structure. There was no, as you said, no agenda. It was literally just, right, whatever we want to talk about, we'll talk about. And, yeah, it's quite nice. It was a bit more relaxed, wasn't it? 100%.
Worked very well.
So how are you doing anyway? You keeping well?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Enjoying the sunshine today, to be honest. Had a lovely hot day. If we can keep a summer like this for a good few weeks, I'll be more than happy.
Well, apparently it's supposed to go a bit downhill after Tuesday, isn't it? But there we go.
Cheers for good news, mate.
Yeah. That's what I'm here for. Realist.
It's felt Mediterranean for the last few days. It's like everyone moaning that you can't jump on a plane and go away. Or the weather's come over here, I think.
That's exactly it. But as always now, Adam, on these podcasts, we are not alone. We are joined once again by another guest, and I'm delighted to say that we have non-league referee Russell Jones with us. Russell, how are you doing this evening? You well?
I'm really well, thanks very much, James. It's been a good day. Enjoyed the sunshine, so looking forward to it.
How is life for you with the current restrictions and lockdown? How have you been adjusting to life?
Life is fine for me, actually. I'm in an unusual situation because my job normally brings me over to Denmark quite a fair bit. Right. I'm actually locked down in Copenhagen with my girlfriend,
nice.
Which is not a problem at all.
Wow. Non-league Nosh has gone continental.
Yeah.
We're globe-trotting once again.
I'll be giving you the Eurovision answers any moment soon.
As long as you don't sing the Eurovision songs, I think we're going to be fine.
You don't need that.
Well, the Iceland hit was a bit of a banger this year.
I have to say I didn't listen.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not my cup of tea. I'll be
no, it was actually quite good, and it wasn't their normal thing of people cross-dressing and playing goth music.
Yeah.
Which is what they normally do to make a statement. It was like a good bit of pop music this time. It was decent.
There you go. So just very quickly before we kind of get into this sort of thing, obviously you're over there in Denmark. I didn't know that before we kind of went live. But what is life like over there? How is Denmark coping with everything? Because we've talked about it previously. From a UK perspective, it's just chaos, absolute chaos over here.
I think they've got it a little bit easier because the population density is lower, so it's always going to be less challenging. They've also got a population who are, how can I put this delicately, perhaps a little bit more traditionally law-abiding and kind of doing what they're told.
Yeah.
So the restrictions haven't been so significant. We've always been able to go out, do exercise, be in the outdoors. So I think I've been lucky. I've had it a lot easier than some of the folk in the UK, and I've absolutely made the most of it.
Yeah, definitely. Because as we've mentioned, Adam, I don't really think they know what's going on. I think they're kind of making it up as they go along, really, aren't they? In terms of
the big news that's come out over here, and it is big news, is people that are shielding are going to be able to go out. Those with bad medical conditions will be able to go out with a member of their household for a walk, or they can go, if they live on their own, they're able to go out with somebody from another household as long as you stay socially distanced. And I think that's a big step for the country, because it means that everyone can now actually have exercise, and for me that's good for mental health for people, because I think that's what was driving people insane. But I mean, that thing was earmarked to be something that would be okay when we got to the stage where it was green and level 1 on the alert system. So it does feel a little bit like it's being made up as we go along, and people are obviously apprehensive. And I think it's that natural stress and anxiety over what we can do, which is not going to be good going forward for things like sport, because I don't think people are ever going to really feel comfortable in the guidelines until we can say that we're free of it, because they don't really know how well and how comfortably they can mix. So I think it's a good example of how that sort of stress is going to be within the community. Because I dare say a lot of people that are high risk still won't go out, even though they've been told they are allowed to. Because there's going to be a level of worry there, isn't there?
Yeah, I know somebody from work who's in that category, and she messaged me today saying it's not going to change anything for me at all, because I don't like to get this all political on here. It's it's a football show, but it's still far too high numbers for her to be able to take a risk. She's just not prepared to do it, which is completely understandable. I'm in a not a similar situation. I do have a health condition. It's only asthma, but even with mine, I'm not prepared to take a risk. I'm not changing anything with my structure, with my days now. Until I'm told to go back to work, I'm not adjusting anything. You won't be finding me in a supermarket anytime soon, put it that way.
I think this is the thing, like, it is nice to be outdoors and see loads of people outside now playing sport again, though. That is the one thing that I've noticed, like, just floating about, because I have to go and pick my little one up from nursery and stuff. You go past the local park and you see people kicking a football around and stuff. And weirdly, it feels refreshing to see people enjoying doing that. I went out yesterday evening, and there was, I'd been out a few weeks ago when you couldn't do this extended exercise. I had to go for a walk. But there was like father and son just crossing a ball and knocking it in the back of the net and stuff. And it started to feel like this return to normality a bit, like, people still playing football at the park and stuff. I know we're a long way away from it, but tomorrow as well signals when you can have groups of 6 from different households all exercising together as well. And for football, that's big.
We'll see how well that's observed.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I suppose, like you said, Russell, like, from your point of view, if it's been a little bit easier and people have been a bit more law-abiding, like, I don't know how much you would have seen with what's going on here, but
yeah, I stay pretty close to it. I'm obviously very interested, partly from the football point of view and just generally. So I see when people are being stupid on beaches.
This is what I was going to come on to. Like, it's been nuts.
But equally, you see plenty of other pictures where they're trying desperately to show that it's too crowded on beaches, but you can just tell the angle they're using is designed to tell its own story.
Yeah. It's often the way of the media.
100%. Right.
For me, the interesting thing is kind of quarantine. If I can get a flight back to the UK, then technically I'm going to go into quarantine for 14 days, even though I'm coming from a country where things are a lot better. But
if you can get a flight back,
if I can.
So let's get off into some quick fire questions that we normally do on the show, Russell. Just so that our audience can kind of get to know you a little bit better, and just kind of loosens you up into the podcast. Are you ready for these?
Yes.
I don't know if you've watched the podcast before, if you know what questions are coming up on it.
I don't, so which could make it interesting.
There we go. So, Chinese or Indian?
Indian.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Oh my! Get out!
You've gone against James's natural instinct on the first 2 questions.
Oh, dearie me! What a start! Favorite biscuit to dunk?
I don't, but if I did, probably hobnob.
Yes.
Why don't you?
Because obviously it's a whole fitness regime as a referee. No biscuits for me.
Well, there you go.
Good man.
Good answer. I don't know if you're going to answer this one. Then, favorite alcoholic drink, or is that off the radar as well?
Given that I work for Carlsberg.
Well played.
Great answer. Oh, goodness me.
Instagram or Twitter?
Twitter.
Good choice. Good choice. Favourite type of music? What are you into?
Dance music. Back in the day, raver.
Nice.
Dance music has like had a massive comeback lately.
Yeah, but I should be calling it EDM now, apparently. But
Yeah, it's got all these different hybrids and stuff. I saw this little thing that some girl put together a clip, and it was like about 15 different types of dance music. And I'll be honest, I could barely tell the difference between them, but apparently there's different nuances between them. I'm not quite as well educated on it. But yeah, definitely making a comeback.
No, it's not. I have to admit, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference either. Favourite box set? What's your favourite TV show? What have you been watching?
God, I used to love The West Wing. I obviously watched The Last Dance, and that was amazing.
Still rave reviews, hasn't it? Last Dance.
Still need to watch that.
Yeah. But yeah, I've been watching plenty over the last 2 or 3 months, it's fair to say.
Yeah, definitely. Your favourite film?
Groundhog Day.
That's a good one.
Okay.
I like that film.
Yeah. Managed to introduce my girlfriend's parents to that. They'd never seen it. And that was an experience watching with people who didn't know what was coming.
It was a good film, though. I like that.
Never said it myself. Again, Adam, more just to add to the list. Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Ooh.
Oh.
Maybe the first person, maybe first?
I think you may be the first person that's ever answered cats.
Yeah.
I just love the independence. They've got their own minds. I mean, dogs are lovely as well, but I like the way that cats will just do their own thing.
Yeah.
Don't need much care, do they?
We've got this next question on here. FIFA or Football Manager?
Football Manager.
Good man. You've redeemed yourself from the first 2 questions. Well done.
Do you have a save going at them? Have you got the new one, Russell?
No. I used to play it a lot, but with everything else that's going on. No, not for the time at the moment.
No.
I ditched it for a while as well. James got me back into it, and it's killed me.
Good man. I'm still going with my Middlesbrough save at the moment. I've literally just finished playing it before we went on. So I don't know what season I'm in. I'm probably about 9 seasons into it. Absolutely loving it. Who do you support? Who's your team?
Tottenham.
Tottenham is a popular answer on this show, isn't it, Adam?
Ridiculous. It seems like we get virtually all Tottenham fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a big part of what I do anymore, but I'll keep an eye on what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your favourite player growing up?
David Ginola.
Oh, what a shout.
What a player as well.
What a player.
Yeah. Absolute talent. The best player you've seen live?
Wow. I used to go to an awful lot of England games back in Euro 2000s, France 98. So probably, Michael Owen in his prime.
I was going to say France 98, that was a generation of footballers for us, that was.
I mean, the best game I've ever been to live was the game against Argentina when Beckham got sent off. Michael Owen scored the goal. I mean, just the England fans that night were immense. Getting back to Luton with a hangover at 4 or 5 in the morning was less pleasant, but it was a hell of a game.
Brilliant. So we're going with Michael Owen. That's a good answer, to be fair. Good answers. I like some of those, other than the T and Indian answers right at the beginning. But you redeemed yourself, so it's all good. It's all good.
Absolute privilege to speak to somebody that's been to that game, that England-Argentina one.
Yeah,
that's an absolutely iconic football game.
Yeah,
tell you what, that's another question we can add to the list. Your favourite game you've been to?
Ever attended? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to add that onto the list.
Quite like that, yeah. I'd like, for me, if you're talking about people that have been to international games and stuff, like we've had some people talk about some absolutely incredible games on here, so I think that would be worthwhile doing. Justin Woolley had been to a few, hadn't he?
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that'd be well worth it.
Exactly, yeah. So let's get into some of the main talking points that have been going on in the world of football. I want to get your thoughts Russell, just very quickly before we kind of get into the whole refereeing side of the discussion that we want to talk about tonight. If you may or may not be able to answer this one, it's absolutely fair enough, but your thoughts on the decision to kind of cancel non-league football from sort of like step 3 downwards. What do you make of the decision? Do you kind of agree with what's been going on? What have been your thoughts on it?
My thoughts are it's been an impossible situation and just very, very difficult to manage. You're never going to please everybody.
Yeah.
I think taking the decision to stop the matches when they did was entirely the right thing to do. That just gave everybody clarity. You knew where you stood in terms of your budgeting, your finances. I think that was very sensible.
Right.
For my taste, and it is a personal opinion, I would have tried to find some way of rewarding the successful teams. Maybe along the lines of promoting them, but not relegating others, and just changing the numbers in the leagues for one season.
Yeah.
But literally every solution you come up with has got its own flaws and pitfalls. So I don't envy the people who are making those decisions.
Yeah, I think points per game has been something that was suggested as well.
Have you seen the new one, James, that's been touted in League One? I can't remember what club were drawing it up. It may have been Tranmere, but they're working on a 3-year average points per game based on the places of what would happen to people with the points per game over those seasons versus their end of season placement. And then they've taken what the tolerances are and using the tolerances to put back into the table. And it's like minus 5% to plus 6% on points was their tolerance they drew up.
And at what point do you divide by the number you first thought of?
Well, this is what I mean. Like, I was on an Ipswich forum and they're saying about extending the playoffs as well. And Ipswich fans have obviously been trying to push that calculation as hard as they can to get into extended playoffs, which they still didn't. So even with that methodology, which is deemed to be the fairest, apparently, that's gone through a law firm, I think.
I think that Tranmere suggestion is just a way of them being able to work out how they can survive. I think that's the only reason why that's been suggested.
They would survive on that calculation as well.
Well, there you go then. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They would.
I don't know. I've seen the argument about extending the leagues, and for example, from like from a Premier League perspective, about extending that to 22 teams and only having the top 2 going up, and then having no relegations. That was one I saw this week as another option. I don't know, going back to the original 22 that they were when the Premier League was first kind of formed and thought about, etc. Might be an interesting way of doing it, but yeah,
I don't really see what the problem is in following something similar to what Russell's just said. I mean, I'm sure there'd have to be some complex tweaks, but to push teams up and then amend the number of relegations for next year, at least you'd all know where you started from on day one of the next season.
Yeah,
you'd all know that 5 teams might be going down instead of 4, for instance. So you know where you've got to aim your points target.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
It does mean someone else will come down. I'm sure there will be some people that object to it, but it does seem like the fairest way to reward people, I guess.
Yeah. So let's start talking about your journey into football then, Russell. Before the refereeing side of things came into your life, take me back. So when was your kind of first involvement in football, and sort of what level of the game did you maybe get to before the refereeing side of things came into it?
I was not a great footballer. I was very enthusiastic. I was very passionate. But basically, I was Sunday league and lots of five-a-side, and I did that from age 15 through to age about 30.
Okay. So no like academy staff or no local like Saturday league clubs, anything like that in the non-league scene at all? No.
No, not at all. I was a fan. I kind of followed football avidly, happy to watch it, but my sporting skills were elsewhere. To paint a picture, when I was at university, I represented the university at 2 sports. One was darts and the other was pool.
Sports, like it.
Yeah, I picked them carefully.
Yeah. Both of which quite synonymous with a beer, I notice.
Yeah.
Shaped your career.
You mentioned that your Sunday league and five-a-side thing went up until like the age of 30. So when did the first idea of refereeing come into your mind? Do you kind of remember that is something you wanted to take an interest in, and why was that the option that you went down ultimately?
I think it's really interesting. I mean, as an aside, I also now run the referee promotion scheme for my county, which is Hertfordshire. And you see 3 groups of people coming into refereeing. The biggest group is the teenagers who are seeing it as a great way to keep fit and earn some money. And then some of them get the bug and want to progress through. You've then got the ex-players who generally start in their mid-30s, and many of them then wish they'd started a bit earlier because they realise it's a great way to experience football ongoing.
Right.
And then you get a third group, which I fell into, which is where you get suckered into it because one of your children starts playing. So yeah, I was one of those annoying parents on the sidelines, and I decided I'd be much safer standing in the middle of the pitch and trying to help out and make a difference.
Right.
So yeah, did that for a few years, was enjoying it, and then thought, okay, maybe I can take this a bit more seriously, and it's kind of been a slippery slope from there.
So when you first started off then doing that, did you have to take any sort of courses to begin with at that kind of level, or was it just when you turn up, whoever is happy to take over those kind of games can do it? Because this is something I'm completely unsure about myself.
Yeah, so basically there's a class of soccer which is called mini soccer, which I think goes up to age about 10.
Right.
And at that point, kind of it's far more about enjoyment and non-competitive, and therefore the referees tend to be just kind of coaches or parents or whatever.
Right.
From that point on, so effectively when it goes to more players on each side and offsides come in, then you should be an official referee to be doing those games.
Okay. So you clearly enjoyed doing it then, if you then decided to take it that one step further. How did that come about? What did you have to do at the time to be able to get on board and talk us through that part of it?
Okay. So at that stage, this is probably 8 or 9 years ago, it was quite a classroom-based course. So I was basically going down to one of the schools in Bushey, and every Monday for 8 weeks, a couple of hours at a time, and just learning what it was all about. So you then, at the end of that, you take your laws of the game test, you do your 5 trial games, and assuming it's all going okay, then you get your badge.
5 games.
At that point, would you get refresher tests every so often that you have to, like, just for the benefit of anyone else that's like listening in thinking that's a place to start? Are you done at that point, or do you have to like maybe pay every year to do a refresher to stay on top of it, or how does that go?
No, I mean, if you're happy to referee at absolute grassroots level, then you don't officially at the moment have to take any refresher courses. Obviously, many of the referees do stay very up to speed with what's going on and all of the law changes. Yeah. When there's a big law change, like the introduction of sin bins, then that was mandatory training. But fundamentally, once you're there, in each county there is a referee development officer who will then try and keep the development going. But there's nothing terribly formalised. Where it becomes formal is if you decide you want to start climbing the promotion ladder.
So, like for this season coming, I've gone through some of the rule changes. I try and keep myself up to date with in terms of the point of contact and only minor things. So would that be sent out to you as paperwork as a registered official? You'd be expected just to read up about it and gain that knowledge?
It would normally be emailed out to all of the registered referees by the development officer in the county.
Got you.
Whether they then kind of really understand it and get it into their games. Kind of some will, some won't.
Right. It's a support network type thing then, I guess, from that point onwards.
Yeah, I mean, there's 28,000 referees out there across, I think that's just England. So inevitably, you're going to get a diversity of approaches. Trying to say we want consistency is extremely hard at any level, but especially if you're talking about the totality of referees.
Yeah, we'll get into the consistency later on as one or two topics I want to talk about. So the first 5 games then, you said that you have to kind of go on a trial run. Do you remember the first game that you had? Any sort of like standout moments from that? Kind of how were you feeling, going into that game?
You're really, really nervous. I mean, it's probably best to talk about my first men's open age game because that's where it really got going. So it was your typical council pitch, not the nicest of setting, and 2 Sunday league teams. And suffice to say, within 5 minutes, I'd given a penalty. And by the end of the game, I'd given 2 red cards.
Jeez.
So it was a baptism of fire. But if nothing else, it at least reinforced to me that I was able to do it. I was going to stand up and be counted where I needed to be, and I kind of enjoyed it.
Right. So, I suppose when you're on trial, for when you're being watched doing that, does it kind of add to the pressure where when somebody is marking you? When it comes to those kind of crucial decisions right from the get-go?
Yes, it adds to the intensity. Personally, I like being observed. I think it forces me to raise my game even further.
Right.
Because there's no hiding place.
That's an interesting take.
But certainly you have to be aware of who's watching. You soon build up a picture of the different observers and kind of what they really like and what they are less keen on. So it's like anything; people have their own little kind of foibles, and you just need to be aware of that.
I hate being observed at work. Absolutely hate it. So it's interesting to hear that you get that sort of appetite to really push your game when you're under that pressure as well, because I can imagine
that's probably a bit easier maybe rather than that's your do you know what I mean? Like, you don't obviously rely on refereeing as like your full-time source of income. So for you, Adam, it's probably a bit of a different scenario where like that's your main.
Yeah.
The pressure is probably amplified from that, but whereas for you, Russell, it's just I suppose I'm here. I'm here to do a job. I'm here to have a little bit of fun. I want to enjoy what I'm doing, but at the same time, you got to keep your standards up to a certain level, I suppose, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a competitive person, and I take a real pride in whatever I do. So it's been interesting for me, having not had refereeing on my radar at all until kind of slightly later in life. It's become a massive part of my life. So over the last 7 years, as I've progressed up the levels, done bigger and bigger games, you realise that you're always learning. But it's the same as with the players, as with the coaches. You really want to come off that field of play with a smile on your face because you know that you've done a great job and people aren't talking about you.
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose then, as you're going through the levels, what are the noticeable changes as you're progressing as a referee and going up and up and up the ladder? What would you say have been some of the big challenges that you found?
I think that it basically just comes down to the expectations. As you progress through the levels, the expectations obviously increase, but they also change. So it's very different refereeing a Sunday league game to refereeing an Isthmian Premier game. The amount of contact that players are expecting to be allowed to get away with changes. The desire to play advantage obviously changes fundamentally because the skill levels are such that they can genuinely take advantage.
Yeah.
And then obviously you have to get very confident at blocking out the noise, both literally and metaphorically. So if you're there and there's as there was when I went to Guernsey this year, nearly 1,000 people, you realise that it's a big event. But at the end of the day, you just do your job and focus on what's going on in front of you.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting take that into as well. I guess non-league is attendance is generally increasing. More and more people seem to be heading out to it, and the crowds they can be heard quite clearly on the pitch, and it's pretty funny some of the stuff they come out with as well. But I mean, from a grassroots basis, is it quite difficult to adjust to that thing where you've started off with the juniors and just pushing that game along to a point where you may be getting shouted at a bit and poked for your decisions that you're making by crowds?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of going up through the levels. You never feel like you're completely out of your depth. You just push that little bit outside your comfort zone each time.
Yeah.
And then you cement yourself at that level and you progress and you progress. So I'm really happy it's taken me 5-6 years to progress up the 4 levels that I've progressed. I've had to learn and adjust at each level, and the crowds get bigger, the expectations get higher, and that's part of the fun of it.
Have you has anyone ever said anything to you kind of from a sideline perspective that, I suppose what I'm trying to say, when was the first time you kind of noticed those comments coming in as a referee? How did you first react to?
I think where you really start to pick up on it is when you start to work as part of a team and work as an assistant referee. Because as a referee in the middle, it's kind of all right. You can always run away. It's part of your job to run away. As an assistant, you've got to be where you've got to be. And I do vividly recall a game in the Spartan League when I was on the line, and I was just getting used to that level of football. And there was one spectator who paid his money, and he spent 90 minutes walking up and down behind me, calling me every name under the sun. And even before I'd made a decision, and I'm thinking, okay, if that's what you get off on, then knock yourself out.
Unbelievable. Is it difficult? Again, I suppose this is something that's more channeled towards people that want to get into doing this as a role. How do you block it out and just get on with your game?
It is. What I love about refereeing is that you've got both the mental challenge and the physical challenge. Physically, it is very demanding. Now, at the kind of levels I'm at, I'm probably doing 10 kilometres in a typical game, or about 6 on the line. And it's a really interesting mix of movements as well, so between sprinting and backwards and sideways, etc. So physically, you really feel it, but it's great at keeping you in good shape.
Yeah.
And then mentally, you've got to be resilient, you've got to be calm, you've got to be confident, you've got to be focused. So I think especially for kind of youngsters who are coming into the wide world, the amount of skills it develops in you is phenomenal. But you've got to have a certain character to start with. You've got to have that thick skin that enables you not to take it too personally.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the thing from a fan's perspective. They don't know, even at a Premier League level, I can't tell you any of the referees' names. Do you know what I mean? I don't know them from Adam, but when you're there in the crowd, you're just venting, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? You're not thinking about who's actually in the middle and that as an actual person. But I suppose from your perspective, like I said, it's very interesting to hear that it doesn't really affect you in the way that if someone said that to me or Adam just as a random comment, you'd be like, hang on, what's that about?
It does. Regrettably, it goes with the territory, and there's been some good efforts from the FA with the respect programme, and
definitely.
It has got better, I think, in terms of on the field of play. The sin bins are meant to be having a good effect. I mean, I don't get to see that firsthand, but the word is good on that. So I'm sure that we'll find things, and maybe one of the silver linings with COVID is that you won't get so many mass confrontations or players crowding the referee, just because nobody's going to want to get too close for too long.
Very good point.
Yeah, they did mention that in Germany they've noticed that game times have actually sped up
Yeah.
without crowds there. And it is interesting to know that, because you can't have that closeness, if it will stop some of the simulation that may happen in the game, and some of the stuff that I suppose you could class as just more abusive behaviour just to try and argue a decision. I mean, it's something that I never get really, is that why players argue a decision, because you can't change your mind after a decision has been made. So again, like from a resilience point of view, is there anything in the training that you do that helps you with that part of the mental resilience of what to do with confrontation?
Certainly not in the training that I had. It may have changed in the last kind of 7 or 8 years. What I would say is that then as you progress up through the levels, so much of it is you find yourself a mentor, you find yourself a coach, the observers give you tips and tricks. And actually the beauty of working as a team of 3 means that you are always learning either from your assistants or from the referee who's in the middle. So I think you just spend a lot of time with referees and you just find coping mechanisms. But to me, the simplicity is you ignore the crowd, because at the end of the day, they're viewing things in their own way, and they generally are not particularly clear on the laws of the game. And then in terms of the players and the officials, you've now got all the tools at your disposal that you need. You have your charm, your personality, you have your quiet words, your formal words, and you've got your cards. So I don't really get it when referees complain about player or coach behaviour, because you've got everything you need to deal with it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So, from when you were going through the sort of like the refereeing courses and whatnot, is fundamentally the kind of things that you did, but when you were doing them, is it all structured around the rules, so to speak, of the actual game? Is there anything from that they kind of teach you in terms of the health perspective? Are they kind of like, do they set you anything in terms of fitness regimes? Do you have to meet a certain standard on that side of things, or do they? Is it mainly focused on just the rules of it, and then the rest of it's kind of left to your own devices?
So I may be a little out of date, but my understanding is that it has become a lot more practical. So it's a mix now of being in a classroom, but also then stuff online and stuff out on a field of play as well. So you do get kind of taught, it's going to sound bad, but taught how to blow a whistle. You kind of think it's obvious, but you would be amazed looking back at some of my assessments in the early days, that the number of negative comments I got about the way I was blowing my whistle. So I could bore you to tears with that, but I probably shouldn't do that. But that's kind of, it's one of the ways that you control the game.
That sounds quite interesting. I don't know about you, Adam, but I'm like...
Not something I expected you to come out with, to be honest, Russell.
Okay.
How can you blow a whistle?
Well, let me give
correctly.
Okay, so the simple version is, when you blow your whistle, that should tell everybody how seriously you are viewing what's happened. So if it's a red card offence, then by the way you are blowing the whistle, you should be actually already indicating the severity of it by the duration, by the volume. Yellow cards, 1 notch down, and normal fouls, another level again. So it's one of those tools you've got at your disposal, along with body language and physical presence, and you need to use it wisely.
That's actually quite fascinating when you think back to games, and that's actually given me something that I never realised or have even thought about, that the way the whistle is blown actually would point to the stoppage that's required, and how quickly a player is expected almost to return back to the referee to face punishment as well. But you do notice those like subtle changes when you think back to games. I know next time I watch a game of football, I'm going to be listening to the tone of the whistle more than I am anything else.
What have I done?
No, just straight away, everyone else is going, it's a red card, it's a red card. It's like, if you actually listen,
that's a yellow.
Yellow.
he's just on a yellow whistle, I know.
So, kind of when you first started then, you've done your trial games, you're kind of in your first set of matches, etc. From a fitness perspective, were you in the right kind of were you in the right kind of shape, and how was your fitness levels right at the beginning of your refereeing, and how is it just adjusted as you've gone through the levels?
My fitness levels were plenty good enough to do the games that I was doing as a grassroots level 7 referee.
Right.
They wouldn't have been good enough to do what I'm doing now.
Okay.
And it's one of the real benefits to me of taking referee as seriously as I have, is that I have just got progressively fitter and fitter and fitter. And I think it also, as a referee who's come into it a little bit later than some others, the last thing you want is anybody kind of pointing fingers at your fitness. It's an easy target.
Yeah.
So I would always pride myself on kind of that. They may not like the decisions, they may not kind of like the manner, but they can't complain about fitness.
Yeah, can I ask about? Can I ask about like what your fitness regime normally consists of, Russell? Because it's obviously not going to be of any benefit just to sit there bench pressing weights all day long. But like, where do you sort of focus? Well, it depends how annoyed you get with people. Where do you sort of focus your fitness efforts, and what sort of work do you tend to have to do to keep you at that level and maybe keep pushing yourself?
I mean, for me, it's all about variety. So today I did a 30k bike ride. It was lovely weather. It was great to be out there. Yesterday I did a personal best at 5k, which I was very pleased about. I'm still trying to get down to 20 minutes, and I haven't managed it yet, but kind of that is the eventual aim.
Just make sure you post it on Twitter when you do. Everyone else
of course. Oh, God, yeah. But what helps me also is my girlfriend here in Denmark is an absolute fitness fanatic, and she runs sub 40-minute 10Ks for fun. So basically, just try and keep up with her.
Flipping heck.
I was going to say, because I can't remember who I was having the conversation with the other day. I think it might have been Marvin Bartley. I'm not 100% sure. But we were sort of saying, when with footballers now having to adjust their lifestyles in terms of the fitness that they're doing from home, if you just go out for a solid run, that is no way in representative of what an actual football match entails. You know, as you said, sometimes you're sprinting, sometimes you're walking, then you're having to jog. Your fitness levels and your heart rates and all that kind of stuff are constantly up and down. They're all over the place, etc. So do you kind of vary what you're doing throughout the week, or do you kind of make it up as you go along, etc.? Do you have a set plan?
I don't have a set plan. Lots of people do. For me, though, I just want to keep it interesting. So if I can get on a football pitch, then there's various drills you can do, which basically involve running penalty box to penalty box and back again at good pace, and basically to the point of exhaustion, because that replicates the critical moments in the game when there's a quick break and then there's a break back the other way. Interval training is great to get your overall fitness levels up, and then also for me, because I'm doing quite a lot of work on assistant refereeing on the line where you really need to be able to sprint, I do quite a lot of work on lower body to build up the acceleration and the kind of sprinting capacity as well.
What sort of stuff do you have to do around like the changing of directions and stuff? Like you mentioned something earlier which made me think, like referees do a lot of running backwards and then side pacing and stuff. Like there's a lot more movement than just sprinting and turning. They do tend to move in all directions. How do you clearly can't go for a 5k run backwards, so do you know what I mean? What sort of stuff do you do to adjust for that?
I think in terms of what you need to do on the line as an assistant, you can practice that. So you can do an awful lot of sideways movement. It's not particularly great for your body. It's a completely unnatural movement, but you do need to be able to do it so that you are facing straight on at all times, which is critical. And then in terms of the flexibility, the agility, I swear by yoga. So I think that's just a great way to make sure that your body will have a fighting chance of doing what you want it to do.
So Marvin Bartley said he'd just got right into yoga in this period of time to make his body easier to control. So it definitely seems like a thing that people are taking up. I don't think I've got the flexibility for it.
There's so many things I need to get into. Like,
I cannot imagine you doing yoga, James.
No, you never know. But doing all these podcasts, it really has opened my eyes to the different ways of how people do things. It's I'm such a lazy SUV. I really am. Like, I don't know why. I don't know. I'm probably at that point in my life with newborn and whatnot. I'm just not in a headspace where fitness is like a be all and end all. But then, like, every time I'm having these conversations, I'm just like, oh god, I really should start getting back on these.
But my workout today was an hour and a half in my hot tub. Just stretching the muscles out whilst they're nice and warm. That'll do me well.
Hot tub, Russell. How the other half live, eh? Jesus.
I know, amazing.
Unbelievable.
So it's on the inflatable ones. It doesn't count.
So your journey throughout refereeing, kind of what level did you kind of start at, and then what levels have you kind of gone up to? You know, your Saturday, Sunday football. Where have you mainly focused on, and kind of whereabouts in the country have you refereed as well? As an interesting point.
Okay, so when you qualify as a referee, you are a level 7,
right,
and then you can get promoted up twice within your county to get to level 5. So you go from junior referee to senior county referee.
Okay.
And that basically means you'll be doing games on step 6 or something like that. So your county league games. Beyond that, you become an FA referee rather than a county referee. So all the kind of guys you see working on the Spartan League, the Hellenic League, the Isthmian and upwards, they are all appointed by the National FA. And if you can get to that, you're basically one of the top 5% in the country. And you are allowed to referee anywhere in the country. You can put down a temporary location if you're going, seeing friends or whatever. I've done that a couple of times. But basically, at my level, which is level 3, you tend to get sent up to 50, 60 miles from where you live.
Right. So you're at level 3 now.
Yeah.
Out of 1 to 7. What does it then take to go up to level 2 and then beyond to level 1? And is that something that's kind of on your radar before all of this stuff happened?
It's one of those where you never say never, but
right.
I have to be realistic, which is I've started too late to make it to the very top levels.
Right.
So my current aspiration, to get to level 3 was to some extent a dream come true, because there's only 400 level 3s in the country. It's a big deal, and you're involved in some really, really good games.
Mm.
The aspiration for me now, I think it's more likely I could get myself promoted as an assistant referee, because you can kind of specialise and go one of the 2 routes. If I could get myself promoted as an assistant referee, then I would be doing the national Premier games, so one step away from the Football League, which would be great.
That's pretty special, being able to do it up to that level.
I suppose, really, because is there a difference, like, you know, from your aspect, mentally being the main person in the middle of the pitch to being an assistant? Because I don't know whether or not you'd be happy to be like the one of the top guys at level 3, as opposed to, I'm not going to say just, you know, but being an assistant referee at a level 2. Is there, do you know what I mean? Is there like, you know, does that make sense, what I'm kind of saying at all?
It makes complete sense. I think referees do fall into different camps, and that's why the way the FA have got it set up, which is you have, for somebody like myself, you get 3 years to do both jobs.
Right.
And then you have to specialise. And by then you probably realise whether you prefer, as you say, being the main man, right, or you prefer being involved in even higher level games with kind of more riding on them.
Sure.
So either works, really.
Okay. I do a bit of stuff with Stowe Town, and for a couple of our FA Vars games, we had, I think it is Aaron Farmer referee.
Yep.
Okay. But he was also running the line at League 1.
Yeah.
How does that work as a differentiation, that you can run a line at that level but referee lower?
Well, like I say, you have 3 years at level 3 where you can be both a centre referee and an assistant referee. So I guess he's in his 3rd year, and basically he's got himself promoted as an assistant both of the last 2 years.
Ah,
So he if it's as you described, he's going to have to make a choice maybe now or
yeah,
maybe in a year's time whether he wants to specialise as an assistant on the Football League or as a referee at level 3.
got you. Understand.
Um,
Because it
but
seemed wild to me that you could be that far apart in
yeah,
terms of the leagues, because there's a lot of promotions that have to happen as a club to get you to that level to
well,
play. But
but
obviously officiating different.
yeah, but it's because certain referees are better in the middle and certain referees are better on the line.
Right.
And so just because you're brilliant at one doesn't automatically mean you're brilliant at the other. But I mean, interestingly, one of the biggest bugbears I would have is people not understanding the dynamic of the way the three work together. The number of times as an assistant you'll get told, come on, Lino, get involved, when literally it's a decision 50 yards away, and it would be completely ridiculous and incredible for you to do that. It's mind blowing,
Yeah.
and even managers and players don't really understand that before every game there's a pre-match briefing, and the referee will brief his assistants about exactly the help and support that he would like, because as an assistant you're there to assist.
Mm-hmm.
Some referees want you more involved, some referees want you less involved, and if the referee's told you only give fouls within 10 metres, then that's what you're going to do, rightly or wrongly.
Do you enjoy that part of the game as an assistant, of actually getting that brief from someone and then getting that interpreted and really helping the person in the middle instead of really having to run it, the other, the flip side of it?
Yeah, I love all the games I do, but for somebody like myself, first year at level 3, the first game I did was on the line at Wealdstone. And I mean, working with, that was working with a guy called Robert Massielis, and you may recognise the surname because he is married to Sian Massielis, who is the only female assistant on the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working with him. He's a great guy. He's got himself promoted, and I learned a huge amount just from his briefing, because he's been there, he's done that. The way he talks about the game, the way he thinks about the game, that's one of the real benefits of referees. You can learn from the people who are a level or two ahead of you.
So you said you're in level 3 now. You've just done your first year of that step. From being at that particular level as a referee, which side of the game are you preferring at the moment? Do you prefer being the man in the middle, or do you prefer being the assistant on the line?
I prefer it when it goes well. I mean, that's for somebody like myself, who a few years ago was doing games on a council park.
Yeah.
The idea that I can be in the middle for a big derby at Leatherhead on New Year's Day is amazing. But likewise, as well as being an assistant, you also get to be a fourth official. So being a fourth official on a National Premier game at Maidenhead or at Ebbsfleet is mind blowing. So I love everything about that, and I'm just delighted I don't need to make a choice for the next couple of years. I can continue to enjoy both and see for real which one I'm better at.
When you are in the middle as such and you're the referee, do you have any say over the assistants that are appointed to help you? So do you get to build up a preferred team, or is it all appointed?
I was just about to ask that question. Like, how is the selection process made? Are you aware of that at all? Do you kind of get assigned to the same people again and again, or is it completely different every weekend?
I was going down the route of cohesion, James. I don't know if that's sort of where you were going. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a bit of both. We get no say over it. We go where we're told. So basically, we have to be incredibly diligent about saying when we can referee and when we can't. So there's a whole online system, and about a month in advance we have to give our open dates and our closed dates. And so you have to be very organised, and you have to juggle different bits of your life. So you do that, and then that allows the appointing officer. There's one guy in the south, there's one guy in the north of England. They will then do the whole month's worth of appointments, and you find out about them on generally the 22nd of the month before.
One person.
That sounds like the worst job in the world.
But that's just at kind of the higher levels. So that's at step 4 and above. So there's quite a lot of games, and
I should say.
So yeah, you'd have to get him on to talk about the intricacies of that. But kind of going back to the other part of the question, a lot of the time they will try and minimise travel expenses for clubs by putting you together with people nearby.
Right.
So you do tend to see similar faces. So there's a couple of guys, I live in Rickmansworth, so there's a couple of guys in Watford who I'm regularly out with, and you do get that cohesion. So to some extent, yes, but it's not a key thing, and often you benefit from working with different people anyway.
Okay. Now you may or may not want to answer this next part, but when you're the man in the middle, when you're kind of giving your briefing to the assistants, what kind of things do you say to them? Do you have a kind of set plan of what you want to happen in your head, or is that still an ongoing process as you're?
I was going to say, you're still learning that as well, since it's your first year at the level.
Yeah. I mean, you say similar things, but you just try and improve it and improve it and improve it. I'll give you an example. Obviously, there was quite a lot of law changes at the start of last season.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing in that briefing towards the start of the season was about what you wanted from your assistants with regard to the law changes. So
right.
things like if one of your assistants was sorting the substitutes, then making sure they realised they might go off the far side of the pitch, which was a new change. The biggest one was around the change to the goal kicks and making sure that everybody stayed alert. The short goal kicks, which were brought in, and were aware under the skin of the new rules, was probably the biggest part of it.
Okay.
But also, I mean, there's technicality, but there's also proper teamwork. You are on the day leading that team, and as with any leader, it's your job to motivate, to inspire. So different referees will do different things. You might have a playlist in the changing room to try and drown out the stuff coming from the players' changing rooms.
Yeah.
You might bring along sweets or drinks or whatever, just stuff because at the end of the day, not everybody loves being an assistant. And so you want to make sure that they are as up for it as they need to be.
Yes.
Is there a post-match chat that takes place between you all as well? I know that sounds like a fairly obvious question, but we've obviously just made quite a big thing of how the pre-match thing is quite important. You can learn quite a lot of as an individual. You're developing it. You're building up your brand almost as you go along and what you want. Do you then debrief between you all as to how the game went? And
I suppose there's two scenarios. There's the one where you're being observed, which happens more and more frequently as you go up the levels. So for somebody like myself, it's probably one game in 3 I'll be observed. In that case, the observer will come in 5-10 minutes after the final whistle, and kind of he will debrief to each of your assistants and then to you how he feels you did, and kind of make sure he's clear as to anything he's unsure about. If there's no observer there, then it depends. If there hasn't been much happening, you're not going to do anything too formal, and especially if you've travelled together, then you may just chat about it in the car on the way home.
Yeah.
For somebody like myself, again, I'm always open to feedback. I want to know what they thought I did well, what they thought I could have done differently, because you learn every game.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Adam will probably know more about this than I will, but I believe that each team rates the referee's performance after a game. Is that right? That's right, Adam, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when do you hear about those ratings, if you do at all, and based from that, have you ever kind of experienced anything where someone's given you such a such a a bad rating where you just think, well, that's just completely kind of like untrue. That's not a fair reflection of the game, so to speak.
Well, I mean, the good and bad news is that at my level, you don't get to see the individual club marks.
Okay.
So actually, at higher levels, you do, but then at those levels, every game is videoed, so kind of you can see what you did right and what you did wrong anyway. Yeah. So the only way I get a feel for my club marks is kind of 3 times a year we will be sent our rankings, where we sit versus other referees. And within that, you know whether you are kind of better than average, worse than average, in terms of both your club marks and your observer marks. And basically, if you want to get yourself promoted, you need to be doing very well at both.
Yeah.
You need the clubs to be saying good things, and you need the observers to be saying good things. And conversely, if the alternative is true, then that puts you in the frame for demotion, quite rightly.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Sorry, one thing that's just popped into my head actually, just as a result of what we were just talking about a moment ago. We were talking about the meetings you have with your with the assistants and whatnot, or if you are the assistant with the ref and all that kind of stuff like that. In terms of actual conversations with the teams beforehand, how does that kind of normally work for you? Do you go into the dressing rooms and approach them at all, or is that on the pitch? Do you ever have those kind of conversations at all about how you want the game to go? Don't do this, don't do that, or what's the process for you?
There's nothing like that in the games where I'm in the middle, and certainly I would never go into a team's dressing room. I mean, that's their area, that's sacrosanct.
Okay.
The only opportunities you have are kind of when you're doing your pre-match warm-up. You may interact with the players. That you kind of, if you spot something wrong with their kit, you might tell them then rather than before the game. or if you know the players or the manager, you would just chat. Other than that, it's just a kind of 30 seconds with the captains at the coin toss. But, to be honest, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. The only time it does happen is at more senior levels, at the team sheet exchange. At National League level, then the captains come in with the secretaries, and the referee has the opportunity to say whatever. But it's not really a big deal. I think that the players will very quickly pick up during the game what your hot buttons are and the type of referee you are.
Having watched quite a lot of matches, and then last year really having the benefit, I was able to be in the middle really at the coin toss and stuff for a lot of games because of the way we did our filming and things like that. I was able to note how different the discussions were that take place between the referee and the players at coin toss. You're not normally really privy to that as a fan. You don't really know what's going on. And because I was just sort of filming that bit, I kind of really got to experience that. How valuable do you feel those first opening exchanges are between yourself and the players? And do you have a set routine that you run through as such to bed them into what you expect, or do you tend to play that by ear?
Yes, I have a set routine. I think they are slightly valuable. Players' minds are not really on what you're saying. And it totally, I mean, basically you're only talking to the captains. And captains come in all different shapes and sizes. And actually, if I had one plea to the teams that I would referee, it is think carefully about who you want your captain to be. Because in terms of the interaction with the referee, it can make a big difference. If you've got a captain you can work with, then you're less likely to be giving out cards to their players. He can help you manage them. Whereas if you've got the person as captain who is the loudest, most annoying person on the team, then you're doing yourself no favours, at least from a referee's point of view.
Yeah. I just noticed, I mean, one of the key ones I think back to last season was that I think we had 2 games in a week, and one of them was pretty much like, shake hands, I'm X, I'm Y, brilliant, right? And they literally just said, let's get cracking then. And that was almost as much as it was, like, know what to expect, let's crack on. The referee the next week sort of said, right, I've got 7 points that I want you to adhere to and just to listen to before we start. And I was in the middle filming, and I was almost looking at my watch thinking it's 3:05. We need to crack on. And it was just really made me notice at that point that, some people really have this checklist of things that they want to make sure that go right, and others so casual. It was unbelievable to see the sort of polar opposites.
I mean, I would never disparage anything that any referee does. They've got their own style that works for them. For me, kind of less is more. Then if you've got 1 or 2 points you want to make, which for me it's about, if I call you in with a player, it's to try and avoid a caution, so keep them calm. And if you want to talk to me through the game, come in and talk to me, but talk to me nicely like this, not from 30 yards away. That's all I want the captains to know.
Yeah.
So just in terms of that then, your style as a referee, are you talkative? Do you explain what it is the decisions that you've made? Because myself and Adam, we to the countless games that we've watched, the amount of non-league games, you can hear what referees are saying. And one of the things that really, really frustrates me, and I'll be completely honest, is when a referee dismisses plays straight away. Doesn't want to talk to them, doesn't want to explain the decision, does just literally just like, get away. Like, for me as a player, I always preferred if a referee said, look, this is why I gave it. Your foot was a little bit high, whatever. Let's move on. And I'll be like, okay, fair enough. Do you know what I mean? That's the decision you've made. I can get on with that.
It's very, like, I think from when we've seen it, it's very common where referees try to dictate a fast pace of play as well, isn't it? It's very much like, decisions made, go, like, and keep pushing the game on. It's quite an odd one.
Yeah. So what is your style? How do you kind of approach things like that?
I mean, I think I'm a typical English referee, which is we do talk more. Right. I mean, I think players in this country have it kind of pretty good compared to overseas. If you go to any of the continental countries, you're not going to get that interaction with the referees. They're just giving the decisions. Most English referees are brought up to interact with the players, to chat. And personally, I'm always happy to explain the decision. If everybody took it as nicely as you just said you would, it would be easy and straightforward. But the issues start when you explain it, and then they want to debate the toss. Yeah. That's
I
not
can see Adam smiling. I can see Adam smiling. I know exactly what he's thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking.
Week in, week out. Oh, dear me.
So yeah, I'll explain it, but getting into a debate about it is not good for anybody. It's just distracting.
Yeah.
And interestingly, you talk about pace of play. It's one of the tools that a referee has. It shouldn't always be about speeding it up. I think knowing when to keep the game moving and knowing when to rein it back is an art form. Because if a game's starting to get overheated, you do have, again, the tools at your disposal. You can give slightly softer free kicks. You can take your time explaining things just to let everybody calm down. Whereas other times, everybody just wants to get on with it and there's a cracking game going on and you don't want to get in the way.
Yeah. Definitely. Wow. Mental. Adam, should we get into some Twitter questions? Because I've got quite a few on my Instagram as well. Which I want to get through.
I feel like I've learned more about football tonight than in ages.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I tell you what, let me do the Twitter questions whilst I'm getting the Instagram ones loaded up. So Ben Moore said the best team that you've played for or refereed. So I suppose we're talking about the playing side of things. Was a bit of a no-go, but from a refereeing perspective, what's the biggest game that you've refed?
I think Leatherhead against Carshalton, New Year's Day, about 500 watching. That was a big game, bit of local rivalry, highly enjoyable. For me as a Spurs fan, I did get to referee at the old White Hart Lane, but that was just a corporate thing. But that was pretty exciting.
Nice.
That's incredible.
Just in terms of the game that you mentioned about the biggest one there, the Leatherhead one. What can you remember, like your emotions that were going through whilst the game was in session, like in terms of the actual occasion, or are those kind of things like before the game, and then as soon as it kind of kicks off, you have to kind of switch off from that and it's fully focused on what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it was big, but I felt very ready for it. I've been lucky enough to be on the line at Dulwich Hamlet a couple of weeks previously with more than 3,000 there, because it was non-league day. So all of the kind of Crystal Palace fans were coming down and whatever. So the size of the crowd didn't worry me. You just try and raise your game because you know it's a really important occasion for everybody. But at the end of the day, all you can do is your best and then reflect on it and work out what you can do even better next time.
Yeah, definitely. We've got Dean Cooper who says he's got 2 questions on here. What's the most red cards in one game you've had to show? So we'll ask that first.
I have shown 3 red cards in one game, and that was a couple of years ago in a Sunday County Cup semi-final where one team was expecting to win comfortably and ended up losing and somewhat lost the plot.
Oh.
So were all 3 of them for one team?
Oh, no.
Wow.
That must have started to get tricky, didn't it, when the 3rd red card came out?
I was going to say, it's like obviously as the red cards kind of come out, like at what point, how do you handle that as a referee? Is it like from a captaincy perspective, is that where you then sort of bring that captain over and just go, look, you need to get your boys to calm down, or is it not really that?
You try, but sometimes the captain's not helpful. And given that the 2nd red card was because apparently my assistant was a cheating effing to next Tuesday.
Right.
And then I was too. You just roll with it. But I came off kind of nervous because that's a lot of big decisions.
Yeah.
But actually, both clubs seemed pretty happy with it, and it felt like therefore a job really well done because the more big decisions you've got to make, the more chance there is to mess up.
Yeah, definitely. And the second part of his question was, what is the current situation in regards to new referees coming through, and will there be enough to fulfil all fixtures and have 2 assistant referees as well?
It depends what level he's talking about. And also, it's like everything else with COVID, all bets are off. How will that affect the number of clubs, the number of matches, the number of referees? Generally, as I understand it, referee numbers are pretty stable. It's a bit of a leaky bucket, so you get an awful lot of people coming in, and you get a fair number of people going out as well. But certainly in the steps that I referee, there is absolutely no question. There is plenty of referees to provide kind of 3 officials at all the games I'm involved in.
I think it's SIR, isn't it? Some games.
Yeah.
In the lower, I think from what that particular listener would have been aware of, is that I suppose we're talking steps 8 and below, James?
Yeah.
Is that fair? Yeah, steps 8 and below do struggle sometimes to get that volume of officials.
But then you've got to think, actually, do the clubs want to pay the 3 officials?
Yeah.
Because kind of whilst we are extremely good value and actually very cheap,
you're a good salesman.
It's another expense for clubs and it mounts up over the season.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going on to the Instagram ones. We have got Alfie Burke says, what piece of advice would you give someone who's looking to get into refereeing?
Do it. But to give it a bit more fully, give it a go, because actually if you enjoy it, it can lead to a whole massive new hobby and just different challenges, different pressures, different enjoyment. So if you think you might like it, then chat to County. If it's within Hertfordshire, it would be me. But every county kind of is different. But there's lots to enjoy, and it's surprisingly fun if you have the right character.
Yeah, definitely.
There's been lots of positivity from you in terms of getting into it as a hobby, and it's good.
Yeah, I have to admit, it's one of those things I've always been kind of interested in. I've never been good enough as a player to ever get anywhere near that kind of level that I wanted to. But from a refereeing perspective, I don't know. So it's one of the options I've always considered. So we've got Tim Tyne who said, do you remember the first red card that you gave, and what was the feeling like when you had to do it?
Yeah, it was in my first adult game, and
Wow. Yeah.
it was for a second yellow, two completely straightforward offences, and then it was swiftly followed by my second one where a guy basically punched the ball over the bar and he wasn't the goalkeeper. So it was a bit of a gentle introduction because they were two relatively straightforward red cards.
In regards to a red card or a yellow card, do you know the instant you blow your whistle exactly what that decision will be, yellow or red?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the offence is so clear, so blatant that you know, and then you're just automatically thinking about, okay, how do I manage this situation? Is it a quick red card? Is it a slow red card? What's the exit route for the player so he's not having to go through a crowd of other players to get to the tunnel, etc. Where actually you should know when you blow your whistle whether it's going to be a red or a yellow or whatever, because you should be able to see that situation developing, and actually you can even be saying in your head, red card, red card, red cards. Now it's a yellow card because of the covering defender. So because things change so quickly, you have to have that snapshot and you have to know. So it's no complete answer, but often you do know. Sometimes you want a bit of thinking time.
Okay.
Definitely. So we've got Paul Stanley who asks, has there ever been a time during a game where you've been close to walking off due to players or any incidents as such?
Fortunately, no. I've either been lucky or just haven't enough games yet. But no, there's been times when I really wished I could have the previous 10 minutes back or 30 minutes back because I know that I should have done better. I've even when giving kind of red cards, 3 red cards to the same team. I mean, fortunately, I've never feared for my safety, and hopefully, I never will do.
It's a really good question, that though. Like with the landscape of where things are, and like it's interesting to hear you talk about where that's something that we have to consider in sport. But I think it's interesting that a question like that should come in, because it does mean that the fan base are aware of the fact that referees do get a lot more not just verbal abuse, but physical abuse is also a thing, unfortunately. Then it shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, it has reared its ugly head from time to time. I think not the season we're in, but the previous one. There was I lost count of the amount of BBC articles that came up where they were just like another incident's happened. This has happened across the country. It just seems to be it did seem to be having a bit of a spike at one point. It must be.
Especially in very, very grassroots football, it was terrible. Not good at all.
Really was. We've got Phil Lucas who said, have you ever considered refereeing abroad?
I'm certainly, as we speak, I'm considering refereeing in Denmark on a purely temporary basis, just because they're likely to restart before the UK. And that might be a way of being less rusty. Because it will have been this will be the longest break I will have ever had between matches, in the same way as for players, it may well be their longest break as well. So it'd be good if I can fill in that gap. Other than that, I mean, whilst it's a massive part of my life, it's not what drives where I live. So should I ever decide to emigrate, then yes, absolutely. I would love to try refereeing in another country. But for now, I'm really enjoying things in England, and would expect that to be the way it plays out.
If you do get the opportunity in Denmark, I know it won't be you won't be doing it through something that you initially wanted or expected to do, but surely that'll be an incredible experience to further your game and career as well, to actually try that.
Yeah, it would. And one of the real benefits is that the Danes are extremely good at speaking English. So that would still give me a fighting chance of controlling the game in the normal way. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to do it, and I'm sure I would learn just again, because there would be different styles, different thoughts. It would provoke me in a good way, hopefully.
Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity.
Definitely. We've got. I was saving this topic, Adam, because I knew this question had come in. So we've got Charlie, who asked, how have you found the sin bin rule, and managing that? So, because we've had this debate a lot, haven't we, Adam, about the sin bin and the frustration that certain referees manage it in one way and certain referees manage it in another. Some can't, just don't. We've heard plenty of times, haven't we, where referees have come off and just said that they're not interested in enforcing it for whatever reason. What's your kind of take on the sin bin? Have you found it to be any a benefit for your game?
I mean, I can give you the theoretical answer, but not a practical one, because rightly or wrongly, there are no sin bins at the levels that I referee. So it's been brought in to the level just below where I referee. Anecdotally, I've heard good things from both referees and the leagues that I used to be involved in.
Right.
The consistency piece, I think that there is just a reality, which is, again, you've got 28,000 referees. You're not going to get complete consistency.
Yeah.
In the same way as you don't get consistency in player behaviour, coach behaviour, spectator behaviour. It's just not going to happen. What I would say is, if referees are actively choosing not to properly enforce the laws of the game, then I would hope that in my opinion, they should be reported, because that's not helping anybody. It's just making it much harder for the referees that come after them. It's also making it harder for the players to know what's going on. So if referees aren't doing the job they're being paid to do, which in this case is to enforce sin bins, then I think that's unacceptable.
I think, I don't want to be sceptical over it at all, but I think that I've seen instances which 100% qualify for the exact purpose of the sin bin, and because the booking mechanism has been removed, what I'm then seeing is things that are going unpunished. Now, the FA are rightly reporting that the bookings and punishable offences due to verbal misconduct as such are dropping. And it does make me, like I say, the sceptical part of me makes me think, well, is that as a side effect because some people aren't enforcing it properly and that there isn't a yellow card mechanism in place? And I do wonder if it just needs longer to bed in and for people to properly understand it. Because, having gone through a whole season of football, I've only seen it used twice.
Yeah.
And it fundamentally feels wrong for the amount of episodes of verbal misconduct that you're going to witness during the season.
Yeah, and I think for me, I went along to Suffolk FA's course on the sin bin rules. I sat in the room with a lot of people from various clubs. I left confused more than anything, and then to not see it being used at certain games as well. That, I think, that's been my biggest frustration, because, as Adam quite rightly said, there's been so many times where I've seen it. It's so blatant. And I think I only saw one ref throughout the entire season actually put it into effect. And I just think it's been it could be a massive game changer. Do you know what I mean? Just in terms of the level of respect for a referee, the way that people react on the pitch to certain things, it really, really could help change the landscape of football. But if it's not going to be used, there's no point introducing the rule.
So, I mean, Russell, is the plans for it to go up the pyramid a bit further than step 5 that you know of?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I'm sure that it would be considered, because kind of whether you kind of like what the statistics say or not, kind of at the moment they are pointing to it having a positive effect.
Yeah.
If that is the belief, then of course it's going to be considered. And we'll wait and see. I think it's a worthwhile initiative, because from everybody's point of view, cutting out the dissent is a good thing. It doesn't help anybody. We talked about it earlier.
Yeah,
that's right.
It doesn't help the referees. It doesn't help the players, and it just winds up some of the spectators as well. So it's a good initiative. I'm sure it's working well in some places, but obviously you've got an experience which says that it's not being as consistently applied as it should be, which I'm sure is true in some cases.
But this is the thing, though, Russell. It comes down to what me and Adam perceive as it should have been used.
That's true.
You know what I mean? That's going to be the counter argument. If I turn around and say, right, well, a ref has made this decision, he should have been using the sin bin rule. He's going to go, well, actually, from my perspective, that's not how I saw things. And who are the FA going to who are the FA, any FA, going to turn around and go, well, is a spectator right or is a referee right?
It's the referee every day, isn't it? And I suppose it's just hard.
It's all, I don't know how me as a spectator and somebody who goes along to these games to record and, to put the footage up online, I don't know how my view on any of those matters I don't know who would listen to it. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think, like you say, I think you have to bear in mind that if the clubs don't think the referee has been enforcing the laws of the game properly, they will mark him down. Down. If the observer thinks likewise, they will do the same. That referee will not prosper. So hopefully the system will sort itself out. But there's just too many games and too many referees for it to be uniform and perfect.
Yeah, like I'm all up for dissent being capped and sorted because I think it absolutely it's ruined football for a few years, and it's escalated to quite a horrible stage. So if we can utilise, like, as much as I've joked about sin bins on here before and the fact that I haven't liked the way that they've been like launched and everything, if we could get on top of it and maybe could launch it to a broader basis so there's a bigger support network and more points of reference, I think we could be on to something.
Yeah, and what I'd say from a referee's perspective, whether you are doing sin bins or whether you are just doing a normal yellow card for dissent, the most important thing is that you are seen to deal with it. In the same way as you need to be seen to deal with the first bad tackle, the first time that somebody seriously steps out of line, you need to do something to demonstrate to everybody that is not going to happen today. And it's one of the skills that I've learned, and I don't always get it right. But the games which I have real control over is when I nip it in the bud, when I get it early doors. And everybody kind of goes, oh, okay, we're back off today then.
Yeah.
And the final question that come in, I've already read it, but it's from Charlie, who says, what is the best thing about managing a non-league? Oh, sorry, refereeing rather in non-league.
Best thing about refereeing in non-league? The opportunity to be involved in something that people are so passionate about. I could never have played at this level, and to have the opportunity, hopefully, to positively enhance people's enjoyment. I know that sounds crazy because we're the referees, we're the bad guys. But my job is to make it fair and make it enjoyable, and to try and provide a great piece of entertainment for the people who are there and the people playing. That's what I try and do. That's what the majority of referees try and do. That's what you get the enjoyment from.
Good answer.
That's a great way to end the podcast. Russell, really appreciate your time coming on. It's I think Adam said it earlier on. It's
been educational, wasn't it?
I've learned so much from this one. It really has been a great listen, and I hope our audience at home will take a few things away, especially from our audience perspective. The majority of our audience comes from is from Suffolk, and they are involved in the non-league level. Certainly at step step 5 all the way down to 9. Really,
5 to 9 is the core, isn't it? Really,
of our audience. So if players, coaches take anything away from this conversation, that's a bonus from our perspective. So as I really appreciate you coming on and just giving us your insight and your thoughts, etc. Adam, do you have anything else you want to ask before we?
No, just thanks as well for the positive words. I think there's lots for people to get their teeth into as well, and good stuff for people that actually are interested in getting into the game. You've made it sound like something that can be made into a real project, and I think that's good for people. I think there's a lot of people that want us to get to the point where they're like getting more involved in non-league now, and you've certainly made it sound extremely appealing to do that via the route of refereeing and giving people an insight which we haven't been able to do until today. So as a referee, I thank you for coming on as well and speaking to us, because I know it's a difficult position as well to be in, to come and do something like this as a ref.
No problem at all. I've enjoyed it, and obviously thank you for the opportunity, and to everybody else who's kind of watching, listening. Fingers crossed we get back on the green stuff relatively soon, but most importantly, everybody stay safe and stay well.
I was going to say, just fingers crossed you can get yourself a flight okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, you're stuck out there with copious amounts of beer and a different breed of football. Be terrible, wouldn't it?
That would be such a shame, wouldn't it? But yeah, if you're watching from a YouTube perspective, make sure you hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel as well. If you're listening to the podcasting, any of those platforms that are available, leave us a 5-star review and also subscribe as well. But until we see each other next time, as always, adios.